The train swayed steady under her feet, wheels clacking like a ticking clock, counting down to a life she never asked for. Eloise May sat stiff near the window, gloved hands folded tight in her lap. She watched the dusty prairie blur past, her stomach tight with nerves she wouldn't name. To everyone else in that car, she looked like a proper young woman sent west to marry the sheriff of Bitter Creek. But inside, she carried a secret so sharp it kept her awake at night. The kind that could ruin a man's life. Maybe even take it. She hadn't planned on this. Not the marriage. Not the lie that brought her here. She was supposed to disappear. Stay quiet. Keep her head down. But letters came, one after another, signed with a sheriff's name she didn't recognize, full of hope and promise like they were meant for someone else. And when the Reverend's wife caught her reading them, she made a fuss, called it God's will, said it was Eloise May's duty to go west and become a wife. It didn't matter that the letters weren't meant for her. The Reverend's wife never found out. Eloise May never told her. She just packed her things and stepped onto the train, heart thudding with a mix of fear and something darker. Bitter Creek wasn't much more than a scratch of buildings and a street lined with dust. The sheriff, Jack Maddox, stood out front of the jailhouse when she arrived, tall, square-shouldered, eyes like storm clouds. He tipped his hat, polite but guarded. He didn't know her. That much was clear. But he also didn't ask questions. Didn't call her out. That was the moment Eloise May knew. He hadn't written those letters either. She should have come clean. But when Jack offered her a room in the guest house and said they'd figure things out in time, she just nodded. She wanted to believe maybe she could make this work. Maybe she deserved a second chance, even if it started with a lie. The town wasn't what she'd expected. There was a roughness under the polite smiles, a tension that sat heavy in the air like a storm about to break. People watched each other too closely. Whispers traveled faster than horses. Everyone acted like they were hiding something. Even Jack. He wore his badge like armor, but Eloise May could see the way his eyes flicked over his shoulder when he walked, like he was always expecting someone to catch up. He didn't talk about his past. He didn't talk much at all. There were stories, though. She heard them from the woman who ran the store, from the man who swept the saloon floor. How Jack had come here 5 years back, after a shootout in another county left 2 deputies dead. How he'd never raised his voice, but folks said he had a mean aim and a colder heart. He was fair, though, honest, which meant people respected him, even if they didn't trust him. Eloise may try to settle in. She helped at the church when asked, kept to herself, watched the sheriff from across the street, and tried not to want more than what she had. But secrets have a way of dragging things down with them, and Eloise May's was growing heavier by the day. Then came the robbery. It happened on a Thursday. 3 men rode into town wearing dust and scowls, faces half hidden under hats. They walked into the bank before noon and came out with sacks heavy with coin. One of them, a tall one with a crooked jaw, held a girl by the wrist. She'd been sweeping the porch. Now she was screaming. Jack was already outside when the first shot fired. He pulled his gun and yelled for the men to stop. They didn't. The one with the girl threw her aside and raised his rifle. Jack moved forward, fast and sure, right into the line of fire. Eloise May didn't think. She didn't hesitate. She ran. The sound of the bullet tore through the street. She didn't feel it right away. Just a sharp cold and then heat as it passed through her shoulder. She fell hard, mouth full of dirt, the world spinning. Jack's face appeared above hers, eyes wide, hands pressing against the wound. He kept saying her name, over and over. Eloise May, stay with me. The robbers got away. Jack chased them to the edge of town, but lost them in the hills. When he came back, his hands were still shaking. He sat beside Eloise May for hours in the doctor's office, jaw tight, eyes unreadable. That was when she realized something about him. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of being the reason someone else did. That night, he came to her room. You shouldn't have done that, he said, voice low, thick. I didn't mean to, she whispered, but they both knew that wasn't true. He sat down, ran a hand through his hair. Why did you come here? She opened her mouth, closed it. The truth pressed hard against her ribs. But she couldn't say it. Not yet. Wasn't my idea, she said finally. He looked at her a long time, and she could feel the weight of everything they weren't saying settle in the space between them. You know, he said, almost to himself, I didn't write those letters. I know. Silence stretched. You planning on staying anyway? I don't know. Jack nodded, like that answer made sense. Then he stood, and for the first time since she arrived, he smiled. Just a little. You saved my life, Eloise May. Whatever your reason for being here, I owe you. But debts have a way of twisting. And in Bitter Creek, favors didn't come free. Something was coming. Eloise May could feel it. In the way people talked quieter now when she walked by. In the way Jack started sleeping at the jailhouse again, like he was preparing for something he couldn't name. She still hadn't told him the truth. That she wasn't just a girl with bad luck and a guilty conscience. That the man she was running from wore a badge too. And that he'd made her promise not to speak a word of what she saw the night he shot that boy behind the church. Bitter Creek had its own ghosts. But Eloise Mays had followed her. And they were getting close. The days after the shooting passed slow and strange. Eloise May's shoulder healed, but the wound left something behind that couldn't be stitched shut. Pain came and went in sharp, quiet waves, but it was the way people looked at her now that stung most. Some with pity, some with suspicion, like they didn't know what kind of woman ran straight into a bullet or why she'd do it for a man she barely knew. Jack went back to his usual rounds, but something in him had shifted. He stopped talking to the mayor's men, stopped taking his meals at the saloon. Every night, he passed by her window on the way to the jailhouse, and every time, he paused just long enough for her to notice. Eloise May wasn't alone in her watching. There were others now, names she didn't know yet, but faces that stuck. There was Mississippi Mercy Lane, the widow who owned the guest house, elegant and sharp-eyed, always in black even though her husband had been dead 5 years. She had a way of appearing at just the right moment, asking just the right questions without ever making it sound like questioning. Eloise May didn't trust her kindness. It felt too smooth, like something meant to cover up a bruise. Then there was Deputy Harlan, young, handsome in a clean-cut way, always smiling just enough to make people like him. But his smile never reached his eyes. He watched Jack the way a shadow watches a flame, waiting for it to flicker. Eloise May noticed how he stepped a little closer to her every time Jack was near, and how his voice dropped soft when he said things like, "If you ever need anything, I'll be around." Sheriff don't always see the whole picture. He wasn't lying. Jack didn't see everything, or maybe he just didn't want to. He and Harlan barely spoke unless duty forced them to. Whatever trust there had been between them was long gone. Eloise May felt it like cold air between doors. There was one more, Clay Barlow. He showed up a week after the robbery, riding a dark horse and wearing a coat too fine for this side of the country. Said he was a cattleman from Texas, passing through to visit family up north. But he didn't ask about cattle or the roads ahead. He asked about the sheriff, about the town, about her. Always careful, always friendly. But Eloise May had learned to hear what people didn't say, and Clay never said much about himself. One afternoon, she caught him standing at the edge of the churchyard, staring at the stone angel over the grave of Sheriff Maddox's first deputy, killed in the line of duty 3 years ago. Clay looked like a man trying to remember something he wasn't sure he ever knew. When she asked what brought him to Bitter Creek, he smiled slow and said, "Curiosity. You never know what kind of stories get buried in a place like this." The stories weren't buried. Not really. They were everywhere, whispered under breath and painted into the lines of people's faces. Everyone in Bitter Creek had a past. Even the preacher, who hadn't taken communion since his son was found dead behind the rail yard. Even the banker's wife, who hadn't smiled since her sister disappeared last spring. And every one of them wore politeness like a thin coat. Enough to cover up, not enough to keep out the cold. Eloise May started to feel the lies curl around her like smoke. No one said anything outright, but conversations twisted mid-sentence. Doors shut a little too fast. The sheriff kept a pistol within reach at all times. And Mercy, always so calm, began double-locking the front door and leaving a rifle behind stairs. One night, Eloise May found Jack at the jailhouse, oiling his gun in silence. The lamp beside him flickered, throwing long shadows across the floor. "I think something's wrong," she said. He didn't look up. "Something's always wrong." "No, I think someone's hiding something, planning something." That made him pause. "What kind of something?" "I don't know, but people are nervous. Mercy won't say it, but she's scared. And Deputy Harlan, I think he's watching you." Jack's eyes narrowed. "Harlan's always been ambitious. Doesn't mean he's crooked. He asked me about your past, about the men you lost before you came here." Jack stood, gun still in his hand. He looked tired, worn down. "Those men died because they trusted the wrong person," he said. "Was it you?" she asked, and hated herself for it. He didn't answer. That silence said more than any words could. Eloise May sat back, heart thudding. She didn't know what scared her more, that Jack had a secret too, or that she was beginning to care so much it mattered. Later that week, Mercy handed her a letter. No name, just her first initial scrawled in blocky ink across the front. Eloise May opened it in her room, away from the windows. It was short. "Thought you could run? You owe for what you saw. I'm coming for it." No signature. No need. She knew who it was. The man in blue. The one with a badge and blood on his hands. The one she'd left back east after he dragged her behind the church and told her what would happen if she ever opened her mouth. She hadn't. Not until now. Not really. But she'd stepped into the light. And that was enough. She folded the letter and burned it. Jack noticed her shaking hands the next day. Asked what was wrong. She lied again. Said it was the pain. He didn't push. That night, Clay Barlow came to the guest house porch, leaning against the railing like he belonged there. He offered her a glass of whiskey and a story about his time in the army. She listened because it was easier than being alone. Then he asked, "Ever wonder how a lawman survives a town like this without getting dirt under his nails?" Eloise May looked up. "I think they do get dirt. They just hide it better." Clay grinned. "You're smarter than you look. So are you." He leaned closer, voice lower. "You might want to think twice before betting on the sheriff. Some debts follow a man longer than a shadow." She didn't sleep that night. She kept thinking about that letter, about the fire in Jack's eyes when he talked about betrayal, about Harlan's smirk and Mercy's locked doors. There were too many pieces and none of them fit right. And she was starting to think she hadn't walked into a new life. She'd walked into a trap. The weeks that followed slipped by like sand through a sieve, slow in moments, fast in others, impossible to hold on to. Eloise May found herself caught between two lives, the one she pretended to have, and the one waiting like a shadow just behind her. But somewhere in the middle of all that pretending, something real started to grow. Jack had changed since the robbery, not in big ways. He still kept to himself, still walked with the same quiet steps and guarded eyes. But every now and then, the wall cracked. He'd linger longer when they crossed paths. His voice softened. He started asking questions, not the kind a sheriff asks, but the kind a man does when he wants to understand someone. One morning, she found him on the back steps of the jailhouse with 2 mugs of coffee. Without a word, he handed her one. They sat in silence, the steam curling between them like breath. It was the first time in weeks Eloise May felt warm from the inside out. "You were brave that day," he said, not looking at her. She didn't answer right away. "I didn't think. I just moved. That's the part that scares me," he said quietly. "The not thinking." She looked over at him, surprised. There was something in his face she hadn't seen before. Fear, not for himself, but for her. He rubbed his jaw and said, almost too softly to hear, "I've lost enough people." That was the first crack in him she ever saw. And from then on, she started to look for the others. Eloise May began helping out around town more. Not because anyone asked, but because staying busy kept her thoughts from circling too tight. She sewed torn sleeves for the widow down the street. She scrubbed blood from the church pews, after a man collapsed during service. She even brought food to the jailhouse, pretending she had leftovers, though she'd barely eaten herself. Jack never said no. Deputy Harlan kept sniffing around, too. Always quick with a joke, always standing a little too close. Eloise May smiled when she had to, but every word from his mouth felt like bait. She noticed how his smile grew tighter when Jack was around. How his voice changed, harder, more pointed, like he was building a case no one asked for. "I don't trust him," she told Jack one night, standing in the doorway of the jail as a summer storm brewed over the hills. "I don't either," Jack said, "but I keep him close. It's the ones who act honest you have to watch the most." She stepped into the room, watched him sort through reports and half-read letters. "What about me?" she asked. Jack froze. "You're not honest," he said finally, "but you don't act like it either. That's how I know you're trying." She didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so she just stood there. And in the silence, something changed between them. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something close. A kind of knowing, a fragile trust built out of damaged truths. One afternoon, Mercy pulled Eloise May aside in the kitchen. She had flour on her hands and a rifle leaning near the wall. "You care for him, don't you?" Mercy asked, voice low. Eloise May nodded before she could stop herself. Mercy didn't smile. "Then you best be careful. Love can make a smart woman foolish, and foolish gets people killed." Eloise May wanted to ask what had happened to Mercy's husband, why she still set out 2 plates some nights, why she never talked about the war that had taken half this town and broken the rest. But she didn't, because she knew what it meant to carry grief like that. Too big to say out loud. One of the few good days came in the form of an old dog. Mangy, half-starved, limping down Main Street like he owned it. Eloise May fed him scraps. Jack gave him a name, Whiskey. He took to following Jack around like a second shadow. And for the first time since Eloise May arrived, Bitter Creek felt a little less sharp around the edges. But peace never lasted long here. The bank got hit again. Just one man this time, masked, quiet, precise. No bloodshed, just fear. He slipped away before anyone could catch him. But the way he moved, Eloise May felt her stomach twist. She'd seen someone move like that before. Clay Barlow. He hadn't been seen in days. Not since that strange night on the porch. Jack questioned everyone. Nothing came of it. But the silence that followed felt like the air right before lightning. Jack grew more restless. He stayed up late, combing through old files. Eloise May found him asleep at his desk more than once. One morning, he woke with a start and grabbed her wrist, eyes wild. "It's happening again," he muttered. "It's all happening again." She asked what he meant, but he wouldn't say. Just sat back, rubbed his face, and whispered, "Last time it started like this." That night, Eloise May walked the perimeter of the town alone, needing the quiet. She ended up behind the church, where a piece of her past still lived. The dirt was hard, cracked from heat. The wind kicked up little ghosts. And for the first time, she whispered the name of the boy who'd died. Jesse, just 16, just in the wrong place. Shot by a lawman with a short temper and a long list of excuses. She didn't realize someone was behind her until she turned. "Harlan, you ever wonder if some folks get away with murder just by wearing a badge?" he asked. Eloise May stiffened. "I know what you're hiding," he said. "You think Jack won't care if he finds out? Think again. You'll be on the next train out. Or the next rope." He stepped closer. "But you help me, and maybe we both come out of this clean." She didn't answer. Not then. She just walked away, heart pounding, mind racing. When she got back, Jack was waiting on the porch, arms crossed. "You saw him," he said. She nodded. "He knows. I figured he would. You're not surprised? I've known about you since the day you got here, Eloise May. Just didn't know if you'd stay long enough to tell the truth." Her eyes welled up. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I know what it's like to carry something heavy. And I figured if you ran here, you were looking for something better." A sob broke from her chest. He stepped forward, gently took her hands. "You're not the only one who's been trying to outrun the past," he said. That night, she told him everything. The church, the shooting, the threat, the letter. All of it. And Jack listened. Not like a sheriff. Like a man. "I'm sorry," she said when it was done. "I should have told you sooner." He shook his head. "We both should have." The truth changed things. Made them clearer. But also raised the stakes. Now Jack knew what kind of man was coming for Eloise May. Now Eloise May knew how many people had reason to want the sheriff gone. And somewhere out there, Clay Barlow was waiting. So was the man with the badge and the blood on his hands. And the quiet, crumbling town of Bitter Creek stood right in the middle of it all. The calm didn't break, it shattered. All at once, as if something in the air had finally snapped. Clay Barlow returned the same way he left. Silent, sudden, and with eyes that didn't blink enough. He strolled into the saloon like nothing had changed, as if he hadn't disappeared after the bank robbery. As if everyone wasn't still talking about how the masked man moved like a ghost and left not even a name behind. Eloise May saw him first. She was walking past the saloon windows when she caught a glimpse of his coat. Her stomach clenched before her mind caught up. By the time she turned to run, he was already standing in the doorway, tipping his hat with that same slow smile. "Miss Eloise May," he said, "you still keep company with the law?" She didn't answer, just kept walking. Fast. She went straight to Jack, but he was already gone, out chasing a lead north of town with Harlan, of all people. That left her waiting. Alone. She locked the doors, watched the streets, and tried to breathe through the rising fear that maybe Clay wasn't just back for money. Maybe he was back for her. By nightfall, it was clear Clay had no intention of laying low. He'd already made rounds, visiting the livery, sharing whiskey with a few drifters, even smiling at Mercy Lane like he meant it. That was what scared Eloise May most. His charm, his ability to melt into the cracks of a town like he'd always belonged. When Jack finally returned, he looked like he'd ridden through hell. His coat was ripped, his cheek bloodied, and Harlan was nowhere behind him. "What happened?" Eloise May asked, pulling him into the light. "Trap," he muttered. "Harlan led me there. Rode off the moment bullets started flying." Eloise May froze. "He tried to get you killed?" Jack nodded. "Someone doesn't want me standing by the end of this. And they're getting impatient." She told him about Clay, about the way he smiled, about the unease curling in her gut. Jack listened, jaw tight. He's not here for a second chance. He's here to finish something. And Harlan? Jack hesitated. Harlan knows things he shouldn't. He's been digging into my past, Eloise May. Into why I left Dead River. Into what happened to my last deputy. Eloise May had never asked about Dead River. Jack rarely spoke of the town, only once mentioning that he'd lost too much to ever go back. "What happened?" she asked, now voice soft. Jack stared at the floor like it held ghosts. "I trusted someone I shouldn't, like I trusted Harlan, and it cost me 3 men, one of them barely old enough to shave." He stepped away, ran a hand through his hair. "I came here to start clean, but clean never lasts. Not in places like this." It wasn't just the past haunting them now. It was the present closing in, step by step, and Eloise May could feel it, like a storm too big to run from. Then Mercy found the note. It was pinned to the guest house door, written in the same jagged hand that had signed Eloise May's earlier threat. "You should have stayed quiet. Now they'll bleed for what you did." No name, just the weight of it pressing into their chests. Mercy read it in silence, then looked Eloise May dead in the eye. "This is about more than just you." Eloise May nodded. She knew it was true. It always had been. When she ran from the east, she brought the violence with her. And now, it was planting itself in Bitter Creek, taking root in the cracks. Jack called a town meeting the next morning. The church filled with uneasy faces, men with rifles, women clutching rosaries, children staring wide-eyed from behind their mother's skirts. He told them the truth, about the threats, about the men hiding behind charm and titles. He didn't name names, but everyone knew. Clay, Harlan, the danger bleeding in from every corner. "We can't trust what we see anymore," he said, "but we can trust what we protect." It sounded good, strong, but Eloise May could see the way his hands trembled after. They started taking turns, standing watch. Eloise May sat with Mercy through long, silent nights, staring out windows, listening to coyotes howl in the distance. Jack patrolled the streets with whiskey at his side. The town held its breath, but fear has a way of finding cracks. The first shot came 3 nights later. It shattered Mercy's front window, missing Eloise May's head by inches. She dropped to the floor, heart hammering, and crawled to the rifle Mercy kept behind the door. By the time they made it outside, the shooter was gone. All that remained was the echo, and a single mark carved into the porch post. A badge, scratched deep into the wood. "Clay?" Eloise May asked. Jack shook his head. "No, that's not his style. That's someone trying to send a message." Harlan. Everything pointed to him now. His disappearance, his betrayal, his silence. Then came the fire. The livery went up in smoke just before dawn. Horses screamed. Men ran. Jack and Eloise May helped pull animals from the flames while the sky turned red. Written in soot on the barn wall were the words, "Clean starts burn too." That broke something in Jack. Eloise May saw it. In the way he stared into the fire, like it owed him something. In the way he didn't speak for hours after. When he finally did, it was only one word, enough. He wrote out alone that night. Eloise May begged him not to, but Jack was past listening. "I'll let things fester before," he said. Not again. She waited, prayed. But when morning came, it wasn't Jack who returned. It was Clay, covered in blood, smiling. "I found your sheriff," he said, tossing Jack's badge at her feet. He found out more than he should have. Eloise May rushed past him before anyone could stop her. She found Jack on the ridge outside town, alive, but barely. He'd been beaten, bad. Blood crusted around his eyes, his lips split, one arm hanging limp. But he still held on to something. A torn scrap of paper. Eloise May unfolded it with shaking hands. It was a ledger. Names, numbers, town funds missing, stolen, laundered. Harlan's name was everywhere. And one other. Mercy Lane. Eloise May couldn't believe it. Not at first. Not Mercy, who had taken her in, protected her, loved this town like it was her own child. But the pieces fell fast. The extra plates at dinner. The rifle behind the stairs. The money that kept the guest house running when no one could afford rent. Mercy had been in it from the beginning. Not for power. For survival. She'd done what she had to, just like everyone else. Eloise May rode back alone. This time, she didn't flinch. This time, she knew exactly what she had to do. The dry wind whipped through Bitter Creek like a warning, rattling the shutters and stirring dust along the empty streets. Eloise May stood at the edge of town, looking out over the hills that had swallowed so much of her past. The ledger in her hand felt heavier than it should, a weight made not of paper, but of everything it meant. Mercy's betrayal, Harlan's greed, Jack's near death, the way the town had been rotting from inside all along, and how she just walked into the middle of it. But more than all that, there was the shadow she'd tried to outrun her whole life. Jesse, the boy who died because of mistakes no one wanted to admit. The boy whose death had pushed her to run east, only to find the past trailing her like a pack of wolves. She heard footsteps behind her and turned. Jack, slow but steady, leaned against the fence post. His face was bruised, his eyes still sharp despite the blood and dirt. "It's time," he said. "We can't keep hiding." She nodded. "I'm ready." They rode toward the old church on the hill, the one place that held more ghosts than prayers. The town had gathered too. Men with rifles, women holding each other tight, and children clutching warm blankets. They were tired, scared, but they were here. Jack took a deep breath and looked out over them. "Tonight, we face what's been tearing us apart. No more secrets, no more lies." Eloise May's heart pounded like a drum. She stepped forward, meeting the eyes of the people she'd come to care for, and the eyes of those who had betrayed them. Then, from the shadows, Clay Barlow appeared. His grin was the kind that never reached his eyes. Behind him, Harlan and Mercy stepped forward, faces hard and unrepentant. The tension broke the air like thunder. You think you can stop this? Clay sneered. You're nothing but a ragtag bunch of broken souls. Jack stepped in front of Eloise May, voice steady. You're wrong. We're the only ones still standing. The confrontation didn't explode into bullets or bloodshed. Not yet. Instead, it was a war of words, bitter and raw. Clay accused Jack of weakness. Mercy defended her choices, saying survival forced her hand. Harlan snarled, blaming everyone but himself. Eloise May felt the anger rise in her chest. But beneath it was something else, something quieter but fiercer. It was the memory of Jesse's eyes the day he died. The memory of running, hiding, and carrying guilt like a stone in her heart. She stepped forward, voice shaking but clear. You all talk about survival, but what about the truth? What about the lives you've ruined? The families torn apart because of your lies. Mercy's face faltered for a moment, but she kept her ground. Sometimes, the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it chains you tighter. Jack looked at Eloise May, pride and pain in his eyes. She's right, but hiding it only makes the chain stronger. The crowd murmured, fear mixed with hope. For the first time in months, the town seemed to breathe. Then Eloise May did something she never thought she could. She told them everything. About Jesse, about the shooting, about the choices that had driven her away and brought her here. The pain spilled out, raw and real, and with it came a kind of release. Jack took her hand. We've all carried burdens. It's time to put them down. Clay laughed, a cold, bitter sound. You think this ends here? You think a few words can undo the past? Before anyone could answer, gunfire cracked through the night. Clay and Harlan pulled weapons, chaos erupting as the town scrambled for cover. Eloise May ducked behind a pew, heart hammering, but she didn't panic. She could hear Jack shouting orders, voices returning fire. In the crossfire, Eloise May saw Mercy fall. Blood blossomed across her dress as she clutched her side, eyes wide with shock. Eloise May rushed to her, dropping the ledger beside her. Why? She asked, tears blurring her vision. Mercy's hand trembled, reaching out. Because sometimes survival means sacrifice. The fight ended as quickly as it began. Clay and Harlan fled into the night, leaving the town bruised but alive. Eloise May held Mercy's hand until the life slipped away, the weight of the sacrifice settling over everyone like a heavy fog. In the silence that followed, Jack pulled Eloise May close. This town, this life, it's ours to protect. Together. And in that moment, Eloise May felt the chains around her heart start to loosen. The past was still there, but so was the future, a future she was no longer afraid to face. The sun rose slowly over Bitter Creek, casting a warm glow that softened the rough edges of the town. The fires had been put out, the wounds tended, and a long night of fear gave way to a quiet morning full of hard work and whispered hope. Eloise May stood outside the small church, brushing dirt from her hands, the weight of the past still heavy, but somehow less suffocating. Jack came up beside her, his arm tentative at first before it settled around her shoulders. We made it through, he said, voice low but steady. Eloise May leaned into him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart, a reminder that some things were worth holding on to. The townspeople gathered in small groups, beginning to rebuild what had been broken. Not just the buildings, but the trust that had been worn thin. Children played near the creek, their laughter a fragile promise of better days. Mercy's sacrifice hung in the air like a quiet truth, painful, but also a reminder that love could be found even in the darkest moments. Eloise May visited Mercy's grave, laying wildflowers she'd picked from the hills. The simple act felt like a beginning, a way to honor a life tangled in hard choices and fierce loyalty. She whispered a promise she barely understood herself, to protect Bitter Creek, to protect the people she'd come to call family. Jack joined her there, kneeling beside the fresh dirt. She fought for this town, for us. Eloise May nodded. And now it's up to us. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, the town healed. The scars remained, but they no longer defined the people who lived here. Eloise May found a quiet strength growing inside her. One born not from running, but from standing firm, from facing the past, and still choosing to move forward. One evening, as the sky bled orange and purple, Jack and Eloise May sat on the porch of the jailhouse, watching the last light slip away. Whiskey lay at their feet, content and tired. Jack reached for Eloise May's hand, fingers intertwining. "You were right," he said softly. "Trust isn't given. It's earned, and you earn mine." Eloise May smiled, the kind of smile that held all the words she couldn't say. "We both did." There was no grand declaration, no sudden shift. Just two people, flawed and weathered, finding something steady in the wreckage. Bitter Creek was still a place full of secrets, shadows, and hard truths. But it was also a place where love had taken root, quiet, strong, and real. The kind of love that didn't erase the past, but gave it a place to rest. As Eloise May looked out over the town, she felt something new stirring inside her. Not just hope, but a kind of peace. It wasn't perfect. It never would be, but it was enough. And that was enough to start again.